The Amishmen by Jeremiah Porphy. The Amishman was bound by a blue line of sparkling plasma that tethered the cuffs around his wrists together. At first, he struggled against it, as if desperate writhing could do anything. His only chance of attacking me was with the two long knives that had been attached to his leather hilt, both of which he had attempted to withdraw in our skirmish. They now settled within the dirt a few feet behind him, their rusted blades matching the hue of the ground that they slept on. I raised my left wrist, spotting that his blade had only left a slight scratch on my mecha, forging an arced gray line across my metal armor. My right arm was pointed towards him, extending a light glow from my laser that was prepared to fire, but not kill. Its hue brightened his face with a scarlet hue, breaking through the darkness provided by the setting sun, highlighting his shaved beard, wide eyes, thin nose, and clothing smeared with dirt. I felt lucky that he couldn't see my fear. I was protected by the veneer of a black helmet that kept my face shrouded by dark black glass, which internally projected my exact coordinates onto its surface. I tried to remain alert. It was hard to believe that a man could attempt to plow through the dangerous world without allies, but when he admitted that he was Amish, it made sense. He lived a life to simplicity. Their nomadic people existed both before and after the Hive's invasion of Earth. Their ways had remained the same as well, following the fall of the Old World, the defeat of the Hive, and the rise of the Earth's warring factions. The Amish remained the same. Far away from the Earth's cities and zones, holding up in the Earth's forest, and refusing to touch any technology made past the year 2042. The collective's coming, the Amishman blurted, taking a small breath between each desperate word while he gazed upward, seeming to have more interest in the gray skies above. I knew he was lying. One of the few things that I learned about all prisoners is that everything they said had to be proved with evidence. If the collective was near, the proof would be unavoidable. They were the largest faction that had cropped up since the Hive's invasion of Earth. Their goal was constant expansion, claiming that they needed to unite the world in order to rebuild it into what it once was. Everywhere they went, they traveled in populous groups that were alarmingly loud, emitting warnings through their communications that whoever was near should surrender themselves or die. A few years ago, I had seen the devastation they brought when I heard over radio comms, one of our base camps was taken, and all those who refused to join were silenced with death. With that information, I definitely enjoyed being part of the Technicians. We're the faction that has no interest in returning to the state of the old world. We only step forward, attempting to advance technology beyond what it used to be. Superiority is embedded in everything that we do. Not only had we hoarded the best technology that the old world has to offer, scraping what we could in the Hive War and ensuring that everything from the world before was placed in the memory of humanity, but we had also ensured that we were forward-thinking, forging new roads, weapons, and infrastructure that had not only mirrored what was being planned by inventors prior to the war, but it had come to surpass it. Through doing so, it was our investigation that broke an understanding that once the Hive's hubs were destroyed, a great deal of the human bodies that had come under its own mind also perished. That's a threat, I decided, theorizing that he was actually a collective spy, pretending to be Amish. The same situation had happened many times before, meaning it was bound to happen again. I made sure not to seem too excited or lenient, but through my modifier, words show no emotions, just the fuzzy buzz of intense distortion. "I'm not," he quickly responded as he shifted, deepening his knee's impact on the dirt below, where additional brown stains were conjured on his blue pants. "I'll answer anything." I had many questions that had sprung in my mind ever since seeds had been planted that it was possible to leave the Technicians, with the Amish being my first choice of where to go. Although I didn't know enough about them to actually make a decision, as the Amish had a fractured origin, pieces melded together about their history, clashing with contradiction and shattering into differing tales. They were said to have been started by a man running from the collective, a welcoming old woman, an adolescent who had been ejected from his home city, or a family prosecuted by the government, but they all ended with the same story. The few forests that existed within the earth were the only place to find peace in a world populated by great cities. They didn't need training as there was nothing to defend, and they traveled constantly, managing to evade the weighing pressures of remaining in one place for their entire lives, allowing them the freedom to roam the earth, or were tethered to borders that shift in moments of battle against alternate factions. The Amish were nothing to us but an eventual territory to conquer, or people to be killed in the moment that we crossed them. If we did so at the wrong time, in the wrong way, they would be mowed down and could respond with nothing but titanium weapons at their best and swords of ancient times at their worst. "Where's your base camp?" I replied as I lowered my arm and dimmed my laser, allowing the darkness of night to conquer my vision. I kept my question simple, since oftentimes the records of my mecha were analyzed. It hadn't happened in 2 years. I knew I couldn't take any serious inquiries about whether I was planning on abandoning my post. 20 miles east, he spilled. "What do you want in exchange for further intel?" I asked, knowing that information is never given up without a sacrifice on both ends. "The Amish have no future." "I want a future," he grumbled as light touches of rain began to tap against his shaved head. I questioned why he spoke as if he was using riddles from books. In the old world, hundreds and thousands of words would be sprawled across pages. I personally never tried too hard to understand them, for whenever I did, my eyes strained, begging for the automation that the archives provided, where whatever information I desired would be read to me as opposed to having to bore myself. I was silent for too long, for nothing in my training had ever established what to do when outsider requests to join our ranks, but no matter what I said, it would have to be fired with concise authority. I'll have to think about it. The dripping rain intensified, invading the dirt, bark, leaves, and my metal armor with its touch. Being cut off from its wetness left me stuck in irritation. Desiring to have my skin graze against its inviting cool touch would be a welcome relief as opposed to being left in a metal casing. I freed him from my chains by striking his metal cuffs with my laser. Once broken, the blue sparkling plasmid within dissipated, allowing the clear tubes to now swing freely. He looked to me with a nod and thankful eyes. As he attempted to rise, I kept myself prepared for an attempted attack that never occurred. Instead, he lay his back against a tree and found relief as he released a heavy sigh. His cold breath cast a white slur from his mouth that rapidly dissipated once it clashed against the downpour of intensifying rain that married itself to the high volume of winds that had a union that burst swaying branches. The heavy rains didn't splatter the area. They conquered it by assaulting the ground with their heavy droplets and forging the dirt into thick mud. Each time I stepped inside, my feet sank with a slight dip, leaving me as if I were in a siege where it took a great effort to lift myself from its touch. The area ahead was no longer clear as the darkness of the sky blanketed my vision. The heavy rains cast their shadow over the surrounding area, its large lines twisted with a slight diagonal, while the skies were occasionally kissed with a flash of lightning, and the ominous roar of booming thunder that followed. "Things will be better tomorrow," the Amishman promised through chattering teeth as he crossed his arms. "Let's head back. You'll probably have to provide enough information on the collective that you're useful enough to keep," I notified. I doubted that there was anything he could do. The interest of the technicians lay in the future of humanity, not on the regression that the Amish possessed. He stood a small chance. At least he was resourceful, far more than I was. Any man who could leave their established faction and survive in the wilderness had some use, although I had subdued him with ease. We didn't belong on equal footing. For being armored by a mecha was always going to destroy a man who only had a knife. "I have information on the Amish," he responded. His clothing had been darkened by the rain, and the winds forced his zippers outward. "We don't just have one group, but hundreds of us have gathered together. They want to destroy a hub." "Sure," I doubtfully replied. The last remnants of the Hive should have been destroyed. It was probably just a lie by one who wanted to keep the Amish in line. "We'll have to stop somewhere for the night. We won't get back through the storm." The Amishman rode as if he was ready to lead the way, but by the look he held, it was obvious he was just as confused and anxious as I was. His eyes were wide, scanning behind me, and his mouth was twisted in a manner that made it look like he wanted to talk, but was unsure of what he should say. His uncertainty made me realize that not all of the Amish were perfect navigators like the archives had claimed they were. Then again, the man who stood up before me wasn't just any regular Amish. He had left his post, leaving me wondering that at some point, if he had skipped training that they took, that garnered them such a reputation. We both looked to the left, spotting in the distance the mouth of a gray cave waited. It was untouched by the sway of the storm. Its gray stone remained stoic as the winds raged on. The small tufts of greenery that surrounded it were torn from their position. Leaves, blades of grass, and small bushes all flew within the powerful presence of the storm. To get there, we were forced to wade through a small creek, its waters diluted with small puddles that had reverberating rings of water the moment they were touched by the rain. We dashed past fallen trees and vehicles long abandoned years ago. Painted on their sides was a singular blue circle, the symbol of the collective. The moment I was inside the cave, I felt instant relief, enough to retract my helmet and stare forward at the clashing rains. The moment I was released from my mecha, I felt a sudden slap from the winds. As we rested, I realized how hungry I was. I wished I had brought rations, but I tried to sweep the thoughts away, for I was well aware that there was nothing that could change about where I currently stood, that the food I wanted wasn't outward in the forest, but it wouldn't be waiting at the base camp either. The Amishmen seemed anxious to get out. He paced consistently, muttering quietly about how he hoped the rain would cease. Eventually I went to sleep. The rain subsided, and by the time the morning came, chirping birds were the first thing that I heard. It was nothing compared to the warm, yellow sun and the flying birds. I wished to follow them, to know what it was like to taste the freedom of a path unknown, as opposed to being aware what each day entailed. To do so, it meant I would never sleep in a way I had in the previous night. Despite that the ground beneath me was flat, gray, and hard, I had never known such peace. The Amishman seemed to lack my same feeling, for he is up before I was, crouched low, staring at the mouth of the cave, searching for danger that was yet to come. If it wasn't the collective, it would be the Hive, and if it wasn't the Hive, it would be another faction hoping to secure a place of power. How many times have your tribes gone to fight? I asked. I didn't care what the fight was. There was always a conflict somewhere for those who searched for it, arriving at the doorstep for those who wanted nothing to do with it. Most, he answered. Last I heard, they're down south. That was the only info that I needed to know. I ejected from my suit, freeing myself from the mecha, breaking free of its link, ready to move. I just hope a mecha is everything the Amish hoped for.